Everybody, welcome to the Test, Fail, Learn, Grow, the event where we're going to go beyond the highlight reels and we're going to explore the real lessons behind meaningful success. Around here, we don't believe the most valuable insights come from wins. They come from our failures, but you have to learn from those failures, read and react, and continue to make progress. As those decisions create action, the action creates feedback. So I'm Adam House, as you know, and in every episode, we shine a light on the courageous moves that leaders make, not because they're guaranteed to work, but because they're worth trying. And the growth that follows, that is where the real transformation begins. But before we get into the episode today, I want to share a little bit with you about legacy. You see me posting about it, you hear me talk about it, even from a very young age. It was important to me as a father. What am I going to leave behind? And I've been around wealthy families. In fact, I was on the board of the Leadership Institute of Dubai, and I was able to work with very high net worth families. So when I talk about high net worth, wealth in Dubai, the United States, we're just rounding errors. There's more commas and zeros than you can imagine on those balance sheets. But what I saw was interesting was the dynamic between the fathers and the sons and the sons and the fathers, where either the dad didn't think the son was qualified to take over his business, or the son felt that the dad was never around and all he cared about was business and making money. And so at some point they just said, well, I don't want anything to do with your business, your money. I'm going to go build my own. But eventually they all came around to wanting some of the money and to be a part of it. But it really made me think about legacy, and it really is not something you leave behind. In fact, it's something that you live every day. So one of the most expensive bills, or the most expensive bill you will get at your funeral, and one you'll never be able to pay, is the bill of regret. And so I've shifted and have really never been about building money or fame or success, but really leadership is about who you impact along the way. And the legacy you can leave behind is the impact you have on people and the relationships you build on the journey. So you've seen my son's now posting on LinkedIn, and just over the last 30 years, what I've built really is a legacy of relationships. It's not what you know, but really who you know that's going to make an impact in your life and those around you. So you got to ask yourself, what do I want to be remembered for? And what do I want to model right now? And for me, it's leading others, inspiring others, being mentored by others, and then leading myself in a way that wants to be followed. So now as we get into our guest today, she's definitely a powerhouse in a market that I would consider very difficult to break into. Corina, she's the founder of Starcat, a global advisory and training firm helping Western leaders win high-value business in the Middle East. She's worked with Gulf royals, high net worth clients, global leaders, and has helped her clients go from zero traction to millions of dollars in revenue in one of the world's most relationship-driven markets. She was born in Germany with no Arabic language skills, but built her business through cultural intelligence, trust, and a deep respect for the markets that she serves. She's a bridge builder, brick by brick, and in the truest sense, helping companies cross borders, not just geographically, but mentally and strategically. So Corina, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's such a pleasure to be here.
Well, it's an honor to have you. And we talk about relationships. So one of my previous guests, Geraldine, connected you and I. We had a conversation, and just listening to what you do and how you do it, I thought you'd be a natural fit for the Test, Fail, Learn, Grow, and the mission of the House of Bricks. So what we like to do is, if you're building a business, you test things every day, you fail every day, you learn every day, and hopefully you grow every day. But there is one moment that we can all say, hey, I really swung for the fences on this. It was a big test I took. What is something you can share with us today as we kind of walk through this?
So I think one of my big tests is, so I had this really big client from the Gulf, and I always pride myself in being very honest. But sometimes when you do deals, the question is, how can you get the deal across without like compromising your honesty? So in that case, basically, I had a client who came to town, and I knew exactly what they wanted, what they needed. I didn't have. And it was very clear to me that I could either pretend and say, oh yeah, I'll make it happen, and then make something up at the last minute, or I could be honest. But by being honest, I potentially risked losing the client, because they could have easily turned around and said, well, this is not going to work for us because these requirements just don't fit what we need. So here you have this dilemma. What do you do? Because, are you going to keep your integrity, or are you just going to try and like rescue the deal? So I chose to, because one of my big things is honesty. So I chose to basically be honest and say, look, what you normally need is just not there. I do have options. It's not the same. And it's not going to be the same as what you normally expect from me. But I want to tell you, and obviously the decision is yours. So, but then the client actually turned around and said, well, let's see, we will make it work. I mean, spoiler alert, it really didn't work that well. But the client was they were very gracious, and they said, we're very happy actually that you told us that, and it's okay. And I think, that sometimes shows, and I did several deals afterwards with them. And I think that kind of just showed it's all about, sometimes you have to manage expectation, even at your expense, when you think you could potentially lose this deal. But I think your integrity is worth so much more.
Well, it's interesting, and I didn't know the story you were going to tell, but we were talking about legacy, right? And tied with that is your character, integrity, honesty. Authenticity is one of the most overused words right now. One says they're authentic, but what stage, because I want to ask you this question. We have a lot of founders, early stage companies, and you have that moment where you can get a deal, right, and get the revenue in, but then it also, may cost you more in the long run. What stage was your business at when this situation happened?
I mean, this was still, I would say, fairly early on. I mean, I had known that particular client for a while, but it took me a couple of years to build up the relationship. And as you quite rightly said, in the Middle East, everything is very relationship driven, and it's not something that you built up overnight. Like, you don't just meet people once or twice and then they trust you. Like, it takes like a lot longer. So I had built that trust with that client for a couple of years. However, I mean, obviously you also have, you have financial goals, and you need to meet them, and you have to pay bills and things like that. And obviously that also weighed on my mind. However, I thought, if I'm going to be dishonest here, this is going to this is going to have so many more implications on me, because again, also with the Middle East, it's very much, not only is it relationship driven, but it's very trust based. And if you lose that trust, it's gone. You're done. They're never going to do anything with you ever again. And not only that, they're probably going to tell all the other people, and there could potentially be people in their business realm, in their families, that they then going to say, she wasn't really honest. And people find out, because in the Middle East, as some people may have just seen that President Trump was just in Saudi, and I don't know if you saw what the reception room looked like. So this is a very common thing where people kind of gather, and a very, social social environment where they do business. So imagine if one of them then says, oh my God, Corina, she was so dishonest, and look at all these people who are sitting there and then hearing this. None of them would ever do business with me, and I just thought, maybe I just need to lose this deal if the worst comes to the worst. But at least I've been honest, and my integrity is intact, and they will say, she hasn't lied to us, and this is like a huge thing.
Yeah, when I went there, I'm used to like a fast pace, just even from 19, starting my first business, making things happen. And the first day and a half, like I was advised, don't even bring up business when we were there. It was, hey, we're going to eat. We're going to talk about family. We're going to honor this, this group. And I'm just like, hey, where are we going with this? And it was interesting, just a transition for me, very relationship based. And so I know the position you were in, and I don't, it's not necessarily always an integrity issue, but can you kind of bend your services to maybe fit their needs? And then it ends up not working anyway, or costs you more. So even though you got revenue in, it's a distraction from what your core strengths are. So it's not an easy choice. So hats off to you for making that. And we see that as the test, but is there a failure moment in this, or where you would view it as failure? Obviously, you didn't get the deal, but was there something you could have done differently, even in the prospecting stage? Maybe you spent too much time with them, knowing at some point you may not be able to give them what they want. What would you see as a failure from this?
I think, I think the fact that I probably had to like initially be prepared for them to say, like yeah, we will try and use somebody else this time, because obviously you can't deliver what we need. And I think, yeah, that would have felt like a failure for me, and that was a very real prospect that I had to entertain, because that was a real possibility. um and I just think that it's never an easy decision, is it? Especially if you own your own business and you may have staff to pay and things like that. So from that end, I would say, you're in this kind of situation where you have to make a call, and you have to live with the fact that maybe this will fail. And also, if you give them, like I gave them an alternative, and it didn't work for what they needed, but they were very gracious about it. But it could also have gone a completely different way. They could have just walked out and said, my God, this was a total disaster. And for what they needed in that moment, it actually didn't work. But I mean, what can you do? You try your best, and you just, you know, can you try and plan ahead better next time, or have different alternatives so you can learn from this and see. And I know we're going to come on to the learning part, but it's never easy. But then business never is easy, and if it was, everybody could do it. And very often you have to take tough decisions, and you have to be prepared to fail. And I think we as entrepreneurs, we have to fail more than we succeed, because we have to try different avenues. And this is also part of the learning process, and how you grow, and how like how you could approach situations differently.
Yeah, and before we get into the learning, just because of your business, you're working with very high profile people, helping them strategically with their business. Is there any common, I'm big on patterns. There's always common threads across your client base. Do you see a common thread of reasons that they fail and how you're able to get them out of it?
There definitely is. I think so many companies very often walk into the Middle East and they think, they can use the same approach that they use in Europe or the US, which you can't.
No.
And then they think, okay, fine, we cannot use this approach, but we use the same approach for the whole of the Gulf. So we do in Saudi what we do in the UAE, what we do in Qatar, which also doesn't work, because you need to look at all of them individually. Because yes, they have a lot of common threads, but there's also a lot of differences. And you have to cater to these differences. And then I think people just think, I can just Google all of this. And I'm like, you can, but it doesn't necessarily give you all the tools. And I think it's very important that you take some time to understand who you're dealing with. What is the done thing? What are things that you should talk about? What are things that you should expect? And very rightly, like you said, in that first meeting, you're not going to sign that deal. You're going to have to work on your relationship, and 90% will not be about business. And a lot of people go, oh, but that's like a waste of time. Or that's like how, I mean, look, I'm German. Like the Germans are like, we
Me too.
have an hour and we need to get this across the line. And I'm like, it doesn't work like this. You need to entertain a bit, you need to look after your soft skills, and you need to entertain the client, like find out a little bit more about Saudi, for example, or find out a little bit more about Qatar, drink the Saudi coffee like President Trump just did, all of these kind of things. Like, and if you don't build that bond, it's never going to work. And I think a lot of people underestimate it. It's not rocket science. And it's actually very simple, but people just think, oh no, we can just do what we always do.
Yeah, it's funny. People in America that haven't been to the Middle East, they like refer to it like it's one country. It's like, yeah, I'm going to California. Oh, I'm going to the Middle East. But what you said is so important, is understanding the culture, like doing your homework. You can have the best product or services in the world. You don't understand the culture or do something that's not in line with the way they do things, you might as well just get on your plane and go back home, because that will kill a deal faster than anything. So understanding the culture. And from your testing and failing, let's kind of get into the learning stage. What did you learn from that experience, and how has it benefited you with your business?
I think the big learning was definitely that, honesty is the best policy, that you have to manage expectations, and you should be very straightforward. Because I found out about another person who was dealing with a high profile client that I had dealt with previously. And basically, I never had a problem, even if I didn't have what they needed at the time. And I always managed their expectation, and they were always fine. I never had a problem. It always worked. And then that person didn't do this and lied to them and literally lost them at the first try. And the chief of staff for that person said to me, we will never, ever deal with them again because they lied to us. And this is just not right. And I was like, wow, this is exactly kind of what I had felt was the right thing. But hearing it as confirmation from somebody else, I was like, this is unbelievable. And I think that's the big learning curve, that sometimes, honesty is your best policy, and prepare yourself, have maybe a few different options available so you can give options. They may not always be the right ones, but at least it also, in the Middle East, that's also a big thing. Even if you can't accommodate what they want, at least it shows you tried. And that counts for a lot. So
it does. And I'm learning this every day. I really think people miss out on the value of actually telling a prospect, no, like we are not a fit. And you can follow that up with, but hey, do you know anyone else that may need our services? Like it can lead to that. You've just established trust with them. So there is opportunity that can come from that. So has that honesty from this situation come back to help you in any way, specifically like from this client? Did it lead to more business? Did they tell someone else? Did it come back to you at all?
Oh, 100%. Like they then sent me other friends and business associates to say, you should deal with Corina. Like we trust her. Like she is our trusted source, so 100%. So I think that always paid off, and they always felt, that I wasn't trying to do anything where they weren't really sure. They always knew what you see is what you get with me. And I think that counts for a lot. And I think, and again, I think, with the Middle East specifically, because a lot of the countries have quite a lot of money, there's also a lot of people there that are just looking for opportunities to extract that. And I think people in the Gulf have become very wise to this. And this is not like years ago when maybe you could get away with stuff like that.
Right.
This is not the case anymore. People are very, very smart. You know, they've studied in the West, they've studied in the UK, they've studied in the US. They are very, very familiar with all these like tactics and stuff. So you can't just like blag your way and think, oh, I'm just going to sell them anything. It doesn't work. And they will see that much faster than you would imagine, you know, and they can really see that if you have taken time to understand what they want to do, like what the country wants to do, what they want to achieve, where they want to go, and if you have generally taken time to learn about this and then position whatever you're offering according to that, so it actually helps them, which you would think is a basic thing with clients, that you should try and solve their problems and, you know, help them with what they want to do, because that's what we normally are taught. But not always the case.
So we talked about some of the clients in your introduction that you specifically work with, but who is your ideal client, and what is the services that people can expect from you when they work with you?
So any kind of company that has business in the Middle East and they need, for example, they need a sales and marketing strategy. So I just worked with a client that had a lot of different Middle Eastern clients. So they had clients from Saudi, clients from Kuwait, clients from Qatar, clients from the UAE, but their team didn't really understand, like, first of all, who was who? Could you kind of distinguish them by some of the names? How do you read the names? How do you market to them? When do you reach out to them that they are receptive? And then again, how can you do that for Qatar versus Saudi? And you need to have a plan for each. So that's some of the things that I then basically helped them with, and mapped out a whole plan for 2025. So they know exactly when to send what. And then also, aside from that, what channel to use. Because again, Europe and the US thinks email is the holy grail, and in the Middle East, it's not. So it's like to look, where else can we reach these clients? How can we market to them in a way that it's really, really appropriate for them? But I've also worked with, for example, I've worked with speakers that have gone out to the Middle East and had like keynote speeches, specifically a lot of women that were very worried about what should they wear, what can they and should they not say, you know, how are they going to be perceived? Is it safe? That's the biggest question that everybody's always asking me. Is it safe? You know, and just generally just put them at ease, and I think get the team culturally ready. So I'm talking to a couple of companies now that have just won some big contracts in Saudi, but the team have never worked with anyone from Saudi, and they're like, oh my God, now we got this contract, so what now? So they need to have a bit of cultural etiquette and understand, you know, should they do this? Is this visually appropriate or something like this? So those are the kind of things that I do.
Okay. Which is very important, again, because you could spend the time, you spend the money, and it just takes one. It can be as simple as that, one wrong thing that isn't culturally correct. You might, like I said, might as well just get back on the plane, and it's really tough to recover from those. So that's great. It's really something that I'm looking to do as well, kind of expand the House of Bricks mission outside of the US. I'm doing some local keynote speaking here, but have plans probably later this year to bring some messaging to the Middle East. So we'll have to chat about that. I know you're an expert, and I'm sure it can help me a lot in some of those things as well. So as we get to the last part here, and again, thank you for being on this great message just on character integrity, the value of saying no, and it takes a lifetime to build a reputation and one decision to lose it. So let's get into the more exciting part. How has all of this helped you grow your business?
I think, you know, it's just something I think that I'm really passionate about, and one of my missions is as well to show people that the Middle East is actually very different to what the media normally tells you. So aside from doing all the cultural etiquette and everything, I do a lot of stuff on LinkedIn to talk about some of my trips in Saudi. I do a lot of like blogs and newsletters about what's going on, because I just want to bring this different perspective. And every time I go to, so I was in Saudi last week, and I saw some of my Saudi friends who were like entrepreneurs, and they just so inspire me, because some of them I have known for years. So I have this amazing friend called Osama, and I'll do a post on him soon. And he built up this coffee brand from nothing. And I think, like, I am so passionate about the Middle East. He's so passionate about coffee, and I just adore that about him. And it's just brilliant. And he constantly comes up with new ideas. And then I, like, obviously I follow his socials, so I see what he's doing. And then he's always talking about coffee, and this is this and this is that. And I'm like, this is so cool. And I said to him, you know, like, you've built such an amazing brand. This is just so nice. And to see people develop and then collaborate in different ways with it. So for example, I said to him, you know, I think in London, for example, there's no real Saudi or Arabic coffee. The coffee that there is here is the normal coffee, because the Arabic coffee is very different. But a lot of people that I see here, from like when my Saudi friends or my Qatari friends come to London, they're like, oh my God, there's no decent Arabic coffee. And I said to him, I think, you know, there's something here. Like, we can expand a little bit. Maybe we can talk to some of the hotels. So I've suggested it to a few people that I know. And I think that's going to be amazing. And that also helps my business in a different way, but I can then also help people there. And it's so funny. Like, some of my Saudi friends say to me, they say, you're more Saudi than us. Like, you talk about Saudi all the time. I'm like, yeah, but I love it so much, and I see so much potential, and I see the vision. And I think that's sometimes what is a little bit lacking, certainly in Europe. There's not really a big vision for the next 10 years. You know, it's kind of like the people that are in power, they kind of do something for a year or two, and then I don't know what happens. But at least when you look into the Middle East, you have all these different visions. And I think it's really inspiring to see, because it brings together so many different things. And they also talk a lot about things like sustainability and you know, taking care of the planet and things like that. So it branches out into a lot of different subjects.
Well, he sounds like he'd be a great guest too for our show if he wants to come on to, you know, launching a new brand. And I love coffee. Who doesn't? So we're coming up on time here. So again, just want to thank you for joining Test, Fail, Learn, Grow. I know you have great content on LinkedIn. LinkedIn's a great place to meet great people all across the world. And just want to thank you again for your time. And it is very inspiring just to hear those moments of keeping reputation above revenue and your character and integrity above compromise. Those are really things that are difficult every founder faces. So thank you again for joining, and everyone listening. Test, Fail, Learn, Grow every week, every Wednesday, featuring great founders from across the world. And we'll see everybody next week. Thank you.
Thank you so much.